Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 128th episode of Friday at 5. For today's episode, where we look at ICT in different school systems. Uh, so, with this, I shall start the didactic. So, the first thing that we will start the didactic with is the context of ICT in Indian education systems. So, it has been established and reiterated often that the relationship between education and technology is bidirectional. So, just like I sort of briefed in the introduction, ICT is something that is part of our everyday lives. But why talk about ICT specifically in the educational domain? Specifically for two reasons. The first, I mean, what does bidirectional mean? Bidirectional would actually mean that it's a two-way correspondence. Like the more we educate ourselves, the more uh, you know of technology we know, and the more technologically advanced we get, we have source access and privilege to get more educated. So keeping this in mind, it is important for us to take this domain seriously and also explore multiple ways through which we can enhance our experience with information and communication technology. Moving on, technologically evolves and changes every generation. So this sort of we can understand this point through two sub points. That is, the introduction of technology by itself does not radically improve school education. So again, just to put things into context, computer labs or computer systems or computer science as a subject has not been introduced to schools, post 2020. It has been there for a long time. But we see that the colossal change or the colossal uh, uh, absorption into understanding these systems is still not fully penetrated through the school systems. So, mere introduction is not important, but we need systems that complement, supplement, and fundamentally support the growth and learning of the teachers as well as the students within the school system. Lastly, no technology can fix fundamental problems of resource provision. That's another point uh, that is continuously repeated, not just in the NCA but also in the NEP. That while we do talk about these big jumps and the big changes that are occurring in the 21st century, it is also very vital to keep in mind the socio-cultural and the socio-economic differences and the diversity that our country sort of engulfs. And keeping those differences in mind, it is important for us as a community to move forward and make sure that the digital initiatives or the digital enhancements, in a way, do not contribute to the already existing inequalities that are there in our schools or in the social structures in general. So what does one need to sort of uh, move ahead or not keep these things as a hurdle? It the document suggests that motivation and readiness of schools, of teachers, and of students to make this jump is necessary. Moving on to the topic of evolving and emerging technologies. So there are two primary subtopics that the document suggests here. The first subtopic, uh, it props up while we talk about emerging technology, is artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, and virtual reality. I mean, I think these are not words that we are hearing for the first time, but just to give a little primer, what these mean is that the ecosystem of digital education should be created. That is, teachers, students, parents, and administrators need to be well oriented to be able to, put these to actually bring these things into flesh. And secondly, the technologies need to be used and implemented, discerning their impact. So again, taking from the first slide, that just mere introduction is not it. One also has to think about the impact and the multiple implications that bringing in of these technologies, sort of result in. So one of the many examples that the document puts forth is the national program by the government of India that is called UBI, that is the Responsible AI for Youth. Uh, So again, since we do have a time crunch with the didactic, I'm not going to explain a lot around this, but it would be a good idea for everybody who's watching to just make a note of this and maybe research more around what this program really is. It is primarily focused on on youth within schools. The second subtopic here is that of generative AI. Again, not a very new word, something that is familiar to all of us. But just to give a primer, generative AI is the kind of, it's a particular type of AI that creates original content by learning from existing data. So, I mean, the method is by using patterns, structures from existing data to produce new content. So, what the document suggests is that teachers of the 21st century, what we can take from this are the skills to respond to the forthcoming changes that are coming in, and also be a part or sort of be instrumental in playing a complementary role. Uh, and lastly, some examples that the document gives here is of Tarabot and of Diksha, that, these are government initiatives that use generative AI to enhance our pedagogical processes. So, some of the potential areas of ICT in schools. First, of course, is you know access in the sense that ICT has brought in a variety and a disparate sort of amount of access to students and for teachers in multiple domains, not just in access for sourcing things, but also uh, access to different kinds of like stimulation. For instance, there is a possibility that a particular school in a particular geographical area may not be able to learn about or see certain things, but with technology, with ICT, these possibilities do come into flesh. Next is content creation. Again, something that has been taken up by a variety of SCRTs across the country, where uh, with ICT coming into play, teachers or the local resource persons, for instance, have the ability and have the access to create content and to disseminate knowledge and information within the context of children. Moving on to individual attention in everyday pedagogical processes, where when we shift our primary focus from like a particular textbook or a particular XYZ resource, and we inculcate ICT into the game, we also do cater to students with different kinds of interests, different kinds of ability, and different kinds of subject interests. Moving on to the creation of interactive content, something very similar to the second point. And lastly, two various methods of teacher empowerment. More on this particular topic as we move ahead with the discussion. So, some possible ICT solutions for school include the creation of the National Digital Education Architecture, that is the NDEA. Again, I would encourage all of you watching to make a note of this and learn more about it. But just to give a little primer, the NDEA is actually created to facilitate and achieving the goals laid out by the NEP 2020 through a digital infrastructure for innovations by, through, and in the educational system. I mean, very lightly, it creates standards and principles for technology solutions in schools. Moving on to digital books and libraries, videos, animations, audios, online courses, virtual labs, and stimulation. And lastly, content creation capabilities. Uh, and with that, we have another minute left, and I would just take half a minute to highlight some of the precautions that we must keep in mind while we use ICT in school education, especially because we are involved with, with people who are, younger in age, and there are some responsibilities that we as practitioners have must take upon. Again, safety, privacy, inappropriateness, distraction, and commercialization. So with this, I will end the didactic, and I would, move on to the discussion with the panelists. I will start with Bala, sir, which is my first question as to, so as you may also already know, and even the didactic and the documents suggest that we have to ensure that while we do incorporate new provisions and new facilities that are coming in today's time, it is equally important to be careful of the implications particularly within the domain of enhancing inequalities, right? What I mean by that is that we need to ensure that the digital divide among teachers should not increase with the provisions that come in. And more importantly, all students should be able to, make use of these facilities well. So, in this context, sir, what, according to you, could some of the strategies be that can be implemented to address the digital divide among teachers or even students and ensure that all educators are able to get the ICT training and opportunities that they require?
Thank you. And it's a very important question. And probably I would be very happy to answer because I might have done about 150 training programs for computer
Sure.
teachers during my career. My first marriage with computer ICT happened in 1979 when I started learning about the punch card systems. And, the background of ICT in school system in India dates back to the visit of Her Excellency, the Queen of Elizabeth from, UK, when she gifted 250 BBC computers to India. And that triggered the study of the ICT, and Narasimha Rao was the HR minister. And there was a lot of talk on that. And the first intervention into school education in ICT with computer science as a subject, I think I will take the credit of being the first computer teacher, 1980. And my first batch of nine students appeared from my school when Father Kunakal was the chairman of the board. And then he called me and asked me to design the curriculum for the teachers. And you wouldn't believe the kind of challenges that I have faced during the time. 1984, the class project came, and the number of teachers from the NCERT were sent, and I was one of them, to do a program on software development for schools in 1984 at Leeds, right? And, if I look at the book which I produced in 1982, Basic for Beginners, I could just laugh at it because that was a book of class 6, which even an LKG student will not look at that school book for this particular point of time. Technology has evolved. Whenever we introduce the curriculum in the board, as a matter of fact, even the IIT professors used to say, why C++ when you are teaching C? Right? You must start with Unix, whatnot there. So we moved from Fortran and COBOL all the way, and I had met challenges in designing the curriculum. And from integrated computer science 083 course, then we had informatics practices, web training. And today, the problem with the digital divide is that the speed of technology is in what you call geometrical proportion. The learning is in arithmetic proportion. And one major problem that we have is that the markets are haunted with technological products, and therefore informal access to learning of the technology is much more as compared to the formal technology in school systems. While my teachers are very keen to to familiarize with this, the kind of formal training they require could not be given by any board at this point of time, because my students in the classroom are well versed with the latest technology, and this is the boon and the bane of the system, and this will continue, right? When you talk about artificial intelligence, I go back when we said, artificial intelligence we defined as knowledge information processing systems, right? Somewhere, which has nothing to do with at this point of time. So remember one thing, that the self-learning and self-directed learning is the key in terms of technology, right? And the kind of training, I know that there are a number of teachers like our Rajesh Asija and Mukesh and all that, who did a lot of training programs with their computers and all that. But as the days to come, the informal learning aspect of technology is going to be there. But one major challenge which I do see after from 1982 to 2020 to 40 years later, the integration of technology into curriculum and pedagogy is still a big gap, right?
Sure. Yeah,
we don't think of technology in education, but we talk of education and technology. Therefore, even the products the technologies bring through, there is a huge gap because the focus is more on the business part of it, marketing part of it, rather than the academics part of it, right? So all that what you need is a good, call a curriculum expert, a good software expert, a good, visualizer who can sit and who have to do that. I think that aspect is evolving but missing, right? With artificial intelligence and chatbots and others coming through, the way that the education is going to change is anybody's guess. I'll stop there and go for other.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Like you brought, you just spoke about the integration of technology within curricula, however we describe it. And even though this was one of the questions that I had planned towards the end, but because you have spoken about it, I will pick this up with Anand. So my question to you primarily here is that how can the curriculum be adopted to incorporate ICT seamlessly into different subjects, ensuring that a holistic learning experience does come into play? Even though while we definitely you also had messaged on the chat that the inequalities, they are worsening, true, but the approach through which we are implementing AI or ICT for that instance in today's time is to create a more holistic experience that makes students ready for the 21st century. So according to you, can you think of any instances or any projects where you have seen this integration come into play, or a successful way that you could share with our audience?
You started off with an easy question and you ended with a very difficult one. I'll pick pieces of it, right? Now, ICT, like pretty much any other tool or skill, is not. I think we are, as a teacher community, we are so used to dealing with everything from a cognitive standpoint. We really feel that it should be something we can put into a book, right? And we should be able to assess it via a standard exam that we've always done. Now, that's not the case with typical skills and tools, right? If you take ICT, for example, there are 3 modes in which it can be evaluated or rather incorporated. One would be to understand it from a usage point of view. So what Balasa was saying, students today are excellent users of technology, right? The teacher should really be willing to flip things around and be willing to learn from them. Give them the stage, let them sort of be the actors, and you have that. That is one way of incorporating the usage part of ICT. Then there is the computational thinking part of ICT, right? This is more of your the cognitive stuff, the things that you want. So like, as Balasa gave us an example, again, my background's in computer science, and I've seen this thing manifested very clearly in our computer science education in India. There is a whole bunch of people who believe web design is one of the first things you should work with. And there's the other school of people who are so married to microcontrollers and Unix and Minix operating system and all that. They think if your theoretical foundation is perfect, your life is set, right? But then there's the other one who's saying, if you can't do anything in the next half an hour, what is the point of the theoretical foundation? I think this is something that has to be very clearly understood and resolved if you want to involve the computational thinking part of ICT into the curriculum, right? The third thing is ICT in the schooling setup. Now, if you notice, outside of the computer class, whatever that means, or the ICT class, the teachers are not using technology for their work. The school is not using technology to set up their whole foundation, their ERP system, fees collection, anything of that. You still have to come and get a challan done with the DD or a check or whatever it is, right? So there is a usage element of things. So forget about whether we're talking about AI, because I don't know, of course, AI is taking center stage because now that's the one thing everyone is willing to talk about. But if you look at it actually from the ICT point of view, robotics and all is going to be the ones that is going to be even more so. We're not talking about robotics till it hits us. And we're always going to only talk about things when they hit us. So I'm saying, forget about that part. Just look at these 3 aspects. One is the usage of ICT. Second is computational thinking part of ICT. And the third is actually using ICT in your schooling system. Because the more that happens, the lesser you'll need to train teachers.
Right.
Today, the reason I have to train is because you'd never come from home to school on a bicycle. It's only in that 40 minutes in school that I am asking you to ride the bicycle. Whereas if every day, instead of bothering to train you just for that 40 minutes of bicycle riding in school, if it was always a default system that all of us came to school on the bicycle, matter of a week, everyone knows how to ride the bicycle. So if all of my work, my entry, my student record maintenance, my management, my reporting, everything happened on systems, it's exactly what the pandemic did. It was a
Yeah.
band-aid. You did not have the time to get trained. It was a band-aid yank when suddenly you were told you have no other option. And teachers stepped up. They did whatever it was. Jugaad, call it whatever you want. Right? I think, if I put all, I would say the fourth aspect of the ICT, which is also a problem area, is the entire NCERT CBSE approach to things. They think ICT also has to be trained the same way that they're trained for a math teacher or a biology teacher or something of that. So that's not the way to do. I'm saying get the entire system in place. ICT will automatically take place, and then you're actually focusing on the more important aspects of ICT rather than worrying about, because today a student, and I'm telling you, the textbook of CBSE is still talking about a floppy disk and a mouse, and the teachers are struggling to find an example of a floppy disk. They don't have it around them to even show it to the kids. Forget about your PCA mode of teaching mathematics, right? I don't have anything concrete. There is no floppy disk. Teachers market में नहीं मिल रहा है उनको floppy disk. Right. So I think we need to step out of that. Don't treat it as a cognitive thing. There is a cognitive aspect which could be treated cognitively, but we're not doing it. And the third thing is, don't treat it only as a subject. It has to be incorporated into the schooling system.
Right.
Then the training, everything will fall into place. It is a no-brainer there.
Right.
I'll stop.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, Atul, sir.
So I think the first line that you mentioned in your didactic, that the relationship between technology and education is bidirectional. Well, it is so convoluted because most of the times we get confused when we are talking about technology and education, whether are we talking about which direction are we talking about? So I think there are two directions which need to be handled distinctly. There is one aspect, how do we teach computer science and how do we prepare students for the future of technology in a world? That's one aspect. And that has a totally different strategy. And then when you say, okay, we need to use technology to enhance education, that's a completely different strategy altogether. And we cannot mix these two together. They have to be handled separately. So if we look at, I'm not a computer science expert, so I won't say how to teach technology. I think Balaji is the one who introduced technology in CBSE schools and in education, I would say, to be honest with you. So I think, he has done more work. But if we look at how do we use technology to enhance education or learning, so it's really not that difficult. We have made a very big, mess out of it for multiple reasons, and Anand pointed out some of the reasons. But I think if we keep, and Balaji also said, if we keep education at the core and use technology as a tool to solve problems. So I think one of the things we need to understand is technology is just a tool. Technology is not, is the solution. I mean, technology is as an enabler. It's a tool to help me deliver better education. It is not replacing education in any manner. So if we look at the three pillars of education, which is content, pedagogy, and assessment, then the big question that teachers need to ask is, how do I use technology to improve the access to content for my students? How do I give them the right content? So when we say right content, what does it really mean? It means content that my child can understand. So for example, there are times when a child cannot understand the textbook. And there are so many instances that the child cannot read the textbook published by NCERT. The child cannot comprehend that material. So how do I make the content accessible to every child, right? That's one aspect. So can we use technology to do that? How do we make content more interesting? I think that's a very important thing. How do we make content more contextualized? Because The NCERT book is written for 1.5 million schools across India, or whichever number
Yeah.
of across India. The same textbook does not work in every school, by the way. So same content cannot work equally effectively in every school. So can we contextualize content? So how do we use technology to do that? So that's one big aspect. Then is how do we improve the teaching learning process? And then the third is how do we improve assessment using technology? I think if we focus on these three questions, we can really come up with, solutions to
Yeah.
use technology, but there have to be solutions. I mean,
Yeah.
to overcome challenges. So if, for example, if I'm not finding it difficult to teach the circles without technology, I don't necessarily need to use technology. It's not that something, because it's all around us, it doesn't mean that we have to necessarily use it. We have to force it on teachers. So if, for example, if I'm teaching about volcanoes and I know that my student will never be able to visit a volcano and see what happens inside a volcano, now that technology is important, I can use it. But if I'm teaching
Yeah.
gardens, if I'm teaching about gardens, I would rather take them to a garden
Sure.
and not show them a virtual tour of a garden. That'll be so stupid if I want to do that. So we need to figure out where technology helps in achieving a particular learning outcome and then use technology accordingly. I think that's I have been, sorry, but I have been working with technology companies ever since eGurukul time started. Not as old as when Balaji started, but eGurukul was one of the first initiatives in technology learning. And I was part of that team. And ever since then, we have been trying to work, and I've worked with many corporates, as Balaji said, that even today, even if you look at the biggest ed tech company, we are only trying to mesmerize students with technology. Correct. We are selling technology by mesmerizing them, by showing them, wow, look at this Shah Rukh Khan ad which is coming and saying, look, now learning will be magic, just because you buy this one application. Well, it's not going to happen. It has never happened in the last 25 years. It's not going to happen in the next 25 years. At the core of education is going to be the teacher using a tool effectively on a case-by-case basis. And there is no universal use of technology in every classroom. I may use it in one classroom and may not use it in another classroom, by the way.
Yeah.
In one school, a technology might work really well. The same technology may not work in another school. Okay. So it's not a Mugli Gutti 555 that everybody will eat it and they will, become, it's not one of those magic pills that's going to work for teachers. So I think teachers need to develop the acumen of evaluating the right technological tool that can help them improve content creation and delivery, improve the teaching learning process, improve assessment. And if they develop that acumen, it's more of a mindset, it's more of a tech. And I don't think it has anything to do with age because Balaji is sitting right in front of us. He uses more technology than I do. So I don't think that doesn't mean I'm, much behind him, but I'm much behind him in terms of learning and knowledge. But I don't think it's about age. It's about how we think about technology. I think, we are very comfortable using technology to order Zomato. Even my 80-year-old mom can do that or shop on Amazon. But why can't a 70-year-old teacher use technology? That's a very strange thing, So I think it's about the mindset. I think Poonam wants to say something. I'm sorry I took a little longer.
Sorry, if I may just jump in quickly. Laveen, it's frankly just in the interest of where you started. This is ICT and not EdTech.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think this discussion, if we continue on this line, will very quickly go to EdTech, and we love EdTech.
Yeah.
So let's not go there. I think ICT is a different beast, right? And so back to Atulji's point. Yes, it's not about the apps, and that's not what ICT anyway is about, right? So let's just focus on the fact that if you're talking about how do I get ICT across to the children, right? and since you asked for strategies, right? Concrete, specific strategies. I just like to share 2 lines. One is, as I said again, I'd like to differentiate between usage of technology and understanding the foundations of technology, right? Now, using, the students know far better than the teachers ever will, right? Because that's just the same way that they just seem to know so many more songs and all the recent beats, everything that's out there, right? It's self-driven. That's the reason, primarily, to be honest. Now, can I use any of that as part of my other subjects, etc.? Sure, that's a different question. But when it comes to usage, I'd say flip the class around. When it comes to foundations, flip it back to the traditional model, or the traditional model being that the teacher asking the questions, engaging, all of that stuff, right? This would then allow for a dialogue. ICT requires to be a dialogue because one side of the room cannot keep pace with technology. The other side is on the edge of technology. The best way to use it is to keep flipping back and forth depending upon which part of ICT you're focusing on, right? The problem is most of our teachers are only used to doing any subject in one way. Either I have a student-led class or I have a teacher-directed class. Right? ICT, I think, unfortunately or fortunately, like an AC thing, needs flipping constantly. And I think this is what I've really had a tough time struggling getting teachers to understand this aspect, because they like the predictability of being, always being one kind of direction. Right. And it's not about you just flipping around and telling them what tool to use, because then you're not doing the flipping in the right way. Right. So you use this and you teach them. And then you, as an expert teacher, educator, are focusing on the reflection, on the why did this thing happen? How would you do it if all that you could communicate was a 0 and a 1? How would you still go about it? These are the kind of questions that will get them to start thinking. Like, I'll give you an example, quick one. I'll just stop and then everyone else can take over. 2nd grade students can be taught AI in a very simple manner. You take them on the, again, to the garden that Atul sir was taking his children to. Show them the leaves. After a point, they know the difference between a rose leaf and a banana leaf. Right? Now you can play 20 questions with them, saying, here, I have a leaf behind my back. You can ask me questions, which I will say a yes or no to, based on which you'll have to tell me which leaf is it. Right? And then you ask me, is it light green? Is it dark green? Is it serrated edges? Does it have a vein in between? All of those things, right? And when you are doing all that, and then you tell me, okay, it's a rose leaf. And I show you the rose leaf. And I then pause and say, really, how much more difficult would it be for a computer to do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You've got a 2nd grader already thinking in terms of that. Now, this is why I'm saying you flip. Now, the kid would know far better apps which will do image recognition. Don't compete with the kid on that. But this question, only the teacher could have asked. Because the kid is just using the app and very happy to use the next app that their friend is telling them. They're not going to pause. The teacher in ICT is largely required for the pause and reflection. I just stop with that.
Thank you so much, sir, and absolutely spot on. And also complimentary as to what Atul sir actually said, that it is because we started the conversation with directions, right? Like, is it unidirectional, bidirectional? So I think that does put things into perspective.
Yeah, Dr. Kotwal, go ahead, and then we can get Poonam to join us.
Yeah.
You're muted, ma'am.
I put my hand up before you started speaking, and then I lowered it. I lowered it now because you kind of completed everything that was in my mind. Anyway, to add a little bit to what Anand also said, we living in metros are at a decided advantage over those who are living in the rural areas. They do not have the kind of resources that we are capable of. So one of the things that comes to my mind by listening to all this is that if we were to have a team of people who sit down and plan some of these lessons together, it will be a kind of help to those who are struggling.
Sure.
That could be a kind of, holding kind of scaffolding.
Yeah.
Because they can't plan, they don't know, they have no idea.
Well, see, I'll tell you that as part of several educational projects, Dr. Kudva, we have tried to do that, but unfortunately what happens is that the use of technology, so I can only talk about use of technology in terms of, EdTech and not teaching of ICT. I'm not going to get there. But what happens is that because technology is a tool to enhance an educational experience, right?
Yes.
This has to be designed by the person who's delivering the educational experience. So in our experience, what has happened is that whenever you try to, and every company has tried to do that, tried to create lesson plans, modules, animations, etc., etc. We did that for government of Uttarakhand a long time back, and we created content and lesson plans. But they're never used because at the end of the day, the best use of technology has to be invented or discovered by the user. So having standardized, and that is why I think I'm very skeptical about whether the government portals they are planning to provide, content through a portal. I don't know how different that is through as compared to books or anything. Even the IIT's project where they had lectures, the NPET project, I think Balaji would know better, where these university IIT professors started delivering online lectures. I don't think that was as successful as it was perceived to be, because at the end of the day, I saw some of the lectures, they were as boring as being in the class. And it is difficult for an IIT student to walk out of a professor's class on campus, but it is very easy for a person to switch off an IIT professor when he's delivering a boring lecture on a video. So I think it's more important that the teachers are enabled to use technology in classrooms rather than we provide them some cold cut solution.
Correct. Absolutely. And even, I mean, not to denounce any effort or any provisions that have been, that are coming our way. And even the purpose of this that we are doing today, and I mean, of course, the ideas hopefully will continue, is that how can, one person, one practitioner in a school, how, despite the shortcomings, because shortcomings are many, I don't think we need to make a list of, there are so many things that don't work out for you, but how, whatever we have, and, how do we integrate that and make, maximum potential, as they say, how do we bring that out is the idea. Yes, Poonam ma'am. Correct, absolutely, yes. Poonam ma'am,
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, yes.
Yeah, so I would agree with the discussion which happened here that technology is a catalyst and it cannot replace the breadth and depth of a subject content. And I may be sounding very crude in saying that, no matter how engaged a classroom is, how many technical tools you have used, but if this learning does not translate into the board results, which is kind of a measure at the end of year 10 and 12, then, like Miss Pramila also shared, the leaders of the school will deny. So, I mean, the technology is questioned. Throughout the year, we kept saying the classrooms were very engaged. There was inclusion, there was differentiation. We used ICT skills very, very optimally. But unless and until it does not translate into results, it is not of any use. So we have to be very, very carefully integrate the technology so that it doesn't take over the subject content. Because at the end, learners and learning is at the core of education system.
Bala sir,
right.
Yeah.
Yes, Bala.
I think I must place on record what Anand said. There are two different dimensions of one EdTech as one different aspect, ICT as another different aspect over here. That also synergizes with what Poonam said about the results, So what has happened is that right from the beginning, though we started ICT as a discipline of learning because we did not have adequate technology, we did not have expanded technology, we did not have the speed of technology. Because, when I started using the computer, my computer was a desktop 256 KB memory. If I even say that, my children even cannot, conceive that, because we are in a TB memory at this particular point of time. So the question is, things are changing, right? So we also need to change the way we look at the subject of discipline of computer science. No doubt that we are looking at the results in schools, which is terribly bad, but that is true of all subjects. It may not only computer science, even a child may be exceedingly good in English, but may not be able to write well in the examination. There are a number of reasons that. So all that, what's happening is our learning does not relate to the learnability of the learner. Our learning does not relate to the existential knowledge domains of the current situation. Therefore, it's time that we also need to diffuse the importance of examinations, or rather go on continue with the examination to enable. Said and done, the last word, what I would like to say about technology is that that my time has come that my computer teachers in schools are better celebrated than teachers who teach exclusively the binaries or the programming of C+ or that. That's very important. But then the textual material and the curriculum should not be a limiting factor for the effective use of computer teachers in schools.
And these conversations also, I'm sure things would have changed now, but while we were growing up, there used to be this understanding that, the computer is like a very delicate, if at all we're talking about computers, thing that, there used to be so many precautions before going into the lab and just, using. So even allowing students.
Places of religious worship and computer labs were the only places where people removed footwear.
Yeah. And now sometimes me and my friend also like laugh, and we think back that, do you remember the time when we used to remove our footwear before going into the lab? Like, why? But definitely things have changed. But I am relating this thought to the idea of not being too afraid, which some of us also spoke about right in the beginning. If we think about 2019, we never thought that we would all have Google Classrooms on our phones downloaded, or we would be like, for instance, Delhi has declared pollution break, and people didn't even flinch twice before coming back to the online mode of teaching, right? So, these are how transformations take place in the sense. So, one said that definitely about the mindset, and the second thing could also be what Bala sir did speak about. The positionality of a computer teacher in a school, in the sense that they can also be the way or the instrument through which the so-called seamless integration can happen. If there are teachers, if there are practitioners who may not be very comfortable or in the know-how of how these things can be done, I'm sure Poonam madam, and you would also, I'm sure, would also do this, that as a team, as a working team, one can help in integration or the understanding or integrating ICT within school systems to the fullest effect.
I just
I
want to
have
cap
okay.
with one idea. I recently visited a school where they had an IoT lab in the school, right? Managed by the computer teacher, where some of the projects in the school were handled by this IoT lab. And I was simply taken off with the way that people were thinking. So we are changing, and that this idea should move across the system.
I have a question for Bala.
Yeah.
Sir, can we do away with the theory paper for practicals? Theory paper for computers?
Why computers only? I think we should do away with the theory papers for all subjects. The point basically is knowledge is not a skill. Repetition of information provision. Imagine how many papers we are wasting in the country with making the children writing the exam. It is a wealth of this one. I think time has come, we should conduct all our examinations online. Okay. So the question basically is that we should refocus our pedagogy from knowledge to skill, and computers can really help that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Balasa. And I think the first, whenever schools talk about sustainability and environmental protection, etc., the first point that we should be discussing is exams, right? And the kind of
Agree.
papers that you'll be using. So, a quick point to add to Balasa, and I think this is very coincident that you mentioned this. In this particular school that outside of Dehradun, where I was sort of leading the academics out there. One of the things that we had the ATL. That time was in its infancy. We had the tinkering lab. And a lot of our curriculum is what right now Niti Aayog is using in their part 1, part 2, part 3. We actually had mandated that the tinkering lab will manufacture all the manipulatives that any teacher needs in her class, be it language, maths, or science. Because we have a additive manufacturing system, which was the 3D printer. We had reductive manufacturing systems, which were lathes and chisel sets and all of that stuff. So we said that if you're going to have this lab, no teacher will get a budget unless it involves some chipsets, etc. Will not get a budget to buy manipulators. They will come as orders to the students. The students will manufacture it and put it up. The same thing we did even from the computer technology point of view. We said we can't ask students to do anything on the computer until they see teachers doing all their work. Which is why by 2019, and I'll send the name of this organization that we had used, because we were, of course, entirely donation-led. So we had to just beg, borrow from everyone who's willing to give us. But by 2019, November, we had an intranet system set up in school where all the teachers had their lesson plans, their videos, everything already on the intranet. To the extent that some of the teachers thought that the pandemic was my conspiracy, just to prove a point as to why we did this thing. I'm like hell, I would love to do that, but no, I didn't. But the thing was, when the pandemic hit, they were already ready. The only problem we had to deal with was device access, because all of our students were from below poverty line families of Uttarakhand. So we just had to get a donor to provide devices, and everything was set up. But the teachers were so adept; they were wiki manipulating. They're using markup languages and stuff like that. Every single teacher. So you can't get any human being to learn to ride a bicycle by setting aside 30 minutes a day in a room on which they can sit on an exercise cycle. That's never going to happen. You have to get them to come to school every day on a bicycle and buy them accident insurance till they learn how to drive well. That's it.
Right.
The same thing will apply to ICT.
Right. Thank you so much, Anand sir. And just before I wrap up, I know we are 3 minutes overboard, but Anand sir had sent some resources on the chat, and I would just like to quickly take half a minute and read it out. That is for ICT in mathematics, Desmos and GeoGebra, ICT in languages, blogging, and different kinds of content, ICT in science, the Cloud Lab, and similar initiatives. We will put this out otherwise as well, but I hope that everybody who was on board today has made note of of the opinions of all of our panelists, and we hope that moving ahead we take this as something as a plus and not as something that is distracting or inappropriate, and so on and so forth. And we also, as Atul sir very very rightly said, change the mindset towards enhancing skills that are definitely important in the forthcoming years. So with that, I will wrap up today's webinar.